Hey guys, Chris of the Polish Geek, and welcome to another movie review. A review of M3GAN 2, which is the sequel to the 2023 M3GAN, and I admit I didn't really like that movie. I didn't even review to this channel because that was still kind of during the early days of my channel, so it's not like I was reviewing every movie for you guys back then. But I have to say, I actually think M3GAN 2 is a huge improvement over the first M3GAN. That certainly doesn't seem to be a universal opinion. In fact, vast majority of people are very much seem to be saying the first one was much better, while this one basically tries to be bigger and more actiony than the first one, and is as a result completely less fun because of that. But I have to disagree, but it might be mostly because of, as I said, I didn't really like the first M3GAN. Like, I thought it was just too cheesy, campy, and it was trying to be scary where really scariness didn't belong. And most of all, also, it was PG-13, when I thought that it was a movie more suited to be rated R. As a result, it was very much limited by how far it could go. Like, and as a result, it very much felt like the movie didn't know what it wanted to be. Like, didn't want to be scary, campy, didn't want to tell a science fiction story, a sci-fi horror, whatever. Like, my ultimate issue with the first M3GAN was it was just too cheesy and campy, and truly it didn't know what it wanted to be. But M3GAN 2, at least in my opinion, very much seems to have found its place and knows well what it wants to be and fully embraces it. The first thing I gotta say is that this movie isn't even trying to be scary, which I think works very much in its favor, because as I said, the first M3GAN very much went out its way to be very scary, to appeal to horror fans, since it technically was a sci-fi horror, but unfortunately, because of the PG-13 rating, it was pretty much limited with what it could do, and as a result, it really wasn't too scary, in my opinion at least, because of that. But thankfully, M3GAN 2 very much completely ditches any of the scariness for more like an full of action, epic sci-fi, and in my opinion, it works very much in its favor. Like, it's one of those sequels where you can compare the best one. Lots of people are drawing comparisons already. It's Terminator 2, and I think the comparison is just perfect. The first Terminator was kind of in many ways a science fiction horror, and it's like, because the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator was basically this like scary killer robot machine from the futuristic future, and it was completely basically like this complete unstoppable scary force that you just like didn't want to be around. And then Terminator 2, then he returns as a good guy and protects John Connor from an even more advanced Terminator T-1000, but again, the movie did also completely ditch the scariness in favor of the far more actionized sequel, which did make sense story-wise, but it's neither here nor there. We're probably going on a tangent talking too much about Terminator. Because yes, now in M3GAN 2, M3GAN returns, but she's now a heroine, one of the good guys, and she's fighting against a much more evil artificial intelligence, Amelia. And so yes, if that isn't a derivative of Terminator 2, I don't know what is. Of course, like, neither of those two movies are nowhere near as close in quality as any of the first two Terminator movies, but as I said, I think M3GAN 2, as I said, in my opinion, is a huge improvement over the first one. Like, I do really enjoy the story of the movie, because the story is that the mother of Katie, the owner of M3GAN, is now working for the government and tries to. So Gemma, the mother of Katie, wants the government to be now an oversight of the AI because of what she experienced in the previous movie. So she wants the government to oversight the development of AI, to keep it under control. But personally, I from the beginning thought it was a very stupid idea. Like, if there is an entity that would never ever trust to use AI, it's the government, actually. And it proves like I'm right, because later it's soon very much revealed that the government is actually working on a much more advanced AI called Amelia, inspired from M3GAN, and as you can imagine, this Amelia becomes a main villain of the movie. And then, as I said, M3GAN now is a good guy or good girl, and she teams up with the heroes to defeat Amelia, and there is lots of action, all that. This is, as I said, one of those sequels that basically tries to be much bigger and much more actionized than the first one. And for me personally, it worked very well, because as I said, the first M3GAN very much tried to be a horror movie, and it technically was, but as I said, it just wasn't scary for me, and as a result it felt like the movie didn't know what it wants to be, while M3GAN 2 just completely ditches the scariness, at least in the movie, because the subject matter is still very creepy. Like, I admit, the whole development of AI really creeps me out, and but yes, ultimately I think M3GAN 2 is a huge improvement over the first M3GAN, because as I said, it's not trying to be scary, because it clearly at least understood that this is the movie that just scariness doesn't fit in, and instead it's just telling a much bigger story and builds on what the original one did first. And ultimately, this is what I like about it. This is like one of those sequels already compared to Terminator 2, but in many ways it could also be compared to some other 80s sequels, like Aliens to Alien, for example, or Home Alone 2 to the first Home Alone, in a way that it does use some elements of the first movie, but now it basically tries to be much bigger and much larger scale. And in my opinion, it works. And the fact that it completely ditches the scariness even makes it all the better, in my opinion, because again, the first M3GAN really tried to be scary desperately, but it completely didn't do it for me. And the final thing I want to talk about M3GAN 2 is that I don't actually agree with the final message of the movie. Like, in fact, if you could ask me, I would very much be against that final decision that they decided to do at the end of the movie, but at the same time, I love the way it's delivered, and it did kind of make me think of a different perspective, even though I don't agree with it. And now, I'll tell you what this message is, but we're getting into a gigantic spoiler territory. So, if you haven't seen the movie yet, I suggest you leave, unless you don't like spoilers, because the final message is that humans and AI can totally coexist with each other, and humans should very much keep on going with the development of AI, because it's just that AI needs to be basically taught, educated, and used for good purposes, but it very much can totally coexist with the humanity, and it should be evolved and developed further, which basically the final message is that humans should very much keep on developing AI, and I don't agree with that. As I said, I don't like AI, it really creeps me out, and I very much totally can see that evil entities like government or the corporations can totally use it for evil purposes. So if it was up to me, I would just stop the development of AI altogether, even if that's sadly the road you're going down. But as much as I didn't agree with the final message, at least I like the way the movie presented it, and it did kind of make me think of a different perspective, even though if I ultimately disagree with that. But ultimately I say M3GAN 2 is much better than the first M3GAN. Lots of people will disagree with me, and that's okay, but as I said in the beginning, I felt like the first M3GAN didn't really know what it wants to be, while the M3GAN 2 basically completely ditches things that it didn't work and just embraces itself as a fun action sci-fi movie. And that's all I think it works for the movie, in my opinion. So, thank you guys for checking out this review. Press the like button. Please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you later. Bye!